Hey everyone, welcome to our second video about macromolecules. This one is all about carbohydrates. So, have you ever heard anybody talk about dieting and saying, "Oh, I'm going to cut carbs so that I can lose weight"? Well, they're talking about removing some of the carbohydrates from their diet. You can see in the picture here, there are a lot of foods that we really like, or at least I really like, that would be considered carbohydrates, like pastas and bread and a lot of the sugars in our fruits, like bananas and oranges, and even in potatoes, you're going to find a lot of carbohydrates. So it could be hard to cut out carbs from your diet if you like some of these different foods. Well, what are carbohydrates? What do they do? Why do we care so much about them? Well, they have a couple roles. First, they can provide and store energy. And by that, I mean that they provide and store short term energy, energy that you're going to burn and use really fast. So let's think about this. Have you ever thought of athletes and they sometimes will choose to eat a lot of carbohydrates the night before they have a competition? I know when I was a swimmer, we would do what we call carbo loading, and we would eat a bunch of pastas the night before a swim meet because that would give us that kind of short term energy that we needed when we were going to get in the pool and swim. So, carbs provide short term energy. And like I said, those are a lot of pastas and breads and grains, and fruits can have them as well. So, not only do carbohydrates provide and store short term energy, but they can also have some different structural purposes in certain organisms. Now, these are carbs that are slightly different from, the bread and pasta that you might enjoy, but there are some carbohydrates whose entire purpose is structure. So, those are going to be things like chitin, which is in the exoskeleton of insects. You can see a grasshopper there. And think about the last time you've ever stepped on a bug. Did you hear something that was kind of like crunch? Well, that was you crushing its exoskeleton, which was made of carbohydrates. And the other thing that can be structural is this stuff called cellulose that's in the cell walls of our plant leaves. And that can actually provide structure and shape for those plant leaf cells. Pretty cool. You can see there that the um, cellulose that's in the plant leaves, if you look in this picture down here, you can see that that's made up of a long polymer that has a lot of monomer rings bonded together. And that's a big long polymer. But let's break that down a little more. So within every single macromolecule, you can talk about their monomers and their polymers. And if you remember back to our previous slide, you can remember that monomers are the small units and they join together to build polymers, which are larger compounds. So, what is the monomer of carbohydrates? Well, they're called monosaccharides. And you can see monomer, monosaccharide. And saccharide is just means sugar. So here's a little sugar molecule. And this is a monomer of sugar. It's just one ring, and this is a glucose sugar. There are several different types of monosaccharides for carbohydrates. Those are glucose, fructose, and galactose. Glucose is the sugar. Like if you buy sugar at the grocery store, you're getting glucose. Fructose is usually found within natural fruits, and galactose is the sugar that's in milk. You can see the word lactose in there. If it ends in OSE, like glucose, fructose, galactose, that's typically going to mean that it is a sugar. Now, I like to remember that these little sugar monosaccharides are in the shape of a ring because I would say if someone is so sweet, you might put a ring on it. Haha. But hey, it might help you remember that carbohydrates are sugars and their monosaccharides are in a ring shape because if someone was so sweet, you might put a ring on it. Now, these monomers, which you can see just one ring of a sugar carbohydrate, are going to build together with each other and link together through chemical bonds to make polymers. And the polymer of a carbohydrate is a polysaccharide. So poly means many bonded together. And saccharide is a word that means sugar. So a carbohydrate polymer is a polysaccharide. And those are used for both energy and for structure, like I've talked about before, and we'll break that down. Over here, you can see a couple examples. This is our monosaccharide. That's our monomer, monosaccharide, and that's a glucose. When you get two monosaccharides joined together, you can get what's called a disaccharide. Di means two, and sucrose is a great example. And then if you get many more than just two bonded together, like you do in the bottom picture on your screen, you get a polysaccharide. And poly here means many. So many sugars, polysaccharide. Let's break this down into the energy polysaccharides and the structure polysaccharides. For the energy polysaccharides, we have in animals this stuff called glycogen. And if you take a look at that picture down in the bottom corner of your screen, you will be able to see that that polysaccharide is made of many glucose molecules bonded together to make glycogen. And that's an energy polysaccharide that is actually stored in our livers. And when you need more sugar in your body, like your blood sugar is getting low, your liver will release that glycogen to give you the fuel that you need to keep going. In plants, the polysaccharide is called starch. And if you take a look over here, you can see that starch, all of those little red tiny dots, represent one ring of glucose. So that is a very large polysaccharide made up of many monomers or monosaccharides. And that starch is going to contain energy. So if you eat a starchy food like potatoes or carrots or onions or beets or radishes, even asparagus, if you eat a starchy food, you're eating a large energy polysaccharide that's made up of many glucose molecules. So that's sometimes why people want to cut starches or cut carbs out of their diet if they're trying to lose weight. Because if you look at that starch, it has a lot of glucose monosaccharide sugars within it bonded together to make the polysaccharide. So not only do these carbohydrates do energy, but they also do structure in some organisms. So in animals, that's called chitin. And there's a polysaccharide, which is a polymer of the carbohydrates, and that's called chitin. And chitin makes up these exoskeletons. So here you can see a cicada, and it's emerging out of its exoskeleton. That exoskeleton is kind of a crunchy texture, and that's because it's made of a polymer or polysaccharide called chitin. In plants, it's cellulose, as I've mentioned before, and that's found in the leaves of plants. And you can see that is a lot of glucose molecules put together. So, a lot of our monomers put together to make the polymer cellulose, which is a big polysaccharide. And you can actually extract cellulose out of plant leaves and make paper out of it. So, that's kind of an interesting little thing you could do with that. Anyway, thank you so much for listening about carbohydrates. I hope you have a good understanding of the fact that carbohydrates are used for energy and structure, and the monomer is called a monosaccharide, and glucose sugar is a good example. And the polymer is called a polysaccharide, which basically is when you get a bunch of glucose sugar monosaccharides put together. Thank you.